It was one of the hottest summer days in Japan. An unusual patient was admitted to the psychiatric ward of a city hospital. The young man claimed that every living thing he saw looked like a pig. The psychiatrist who examined the unusual patient asked the boy a few questions to check the boy's adequacy. After a few quite normal answers, the girl asked the patient if he had decided to play a trick on her. She asked the boy how he saw her. The young man replied that she also looked like a pig. Asking this question, the woman could not even think that the patient was really telling the truth. Then the doctor approached the boy and said that in that case she was obliged to check if his body was functioning normally. The young man froze as he watched the woman stretch a button on his shirt. Pointing to his chest with her fingers, she asked the patient to describe what he was seeing now. After these words, the doctor abruptly unbuttoned the shirt. Once again, however, the boy saw only two pig heads. Feeling extremely uncomfortable with what was happening, the patient said that he could only see two pig heads. The woman abruptly covered herself with her shirt and looked disdainfully at the young man. Looks like this guy has a problem with his head after all. Sitting down on a chair, the doctor said that the patient's examination revealed a serious defect in his spine. In a certain place, the guy's vertebrae were severely deformed, thus causing the entire spine to put pressure on the areas of the brain responsible for perceiving information. The panel of doctors involved in establishing the diagnosis concluded that this was what was affecting the guys seeing only pigs around. The woman said that the only solution may be surgery to correct the spine, but the chance of success is extremely low. She explained that if unsuccessful, the guy could be completely paralyzed from the waist down. Suddenly, the patient asked the doctor if she had finished explaining. The woman nodded her head, at which point the guy asked her to give him his spine back. The psychiatrist looked at the patient in surprise and smiled. A very handsome young boy turned out to be a waste of time for her. A few minutes later, the boy walked out of the hospital building and boarded a bus. Yawning loudly, he sat down in the back seat, clutching the diagnosis folder tightly in his hands. This guy's name was Ye Chuan, and he had a characteristic that made him different from other people. Ever since he was a young child, everything alive that he sees looks like a pig in his eyes. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that his parents were butchers. Either way, Chuan has already gotten used to the fact that he sees this world in a special way. Today was going to be the start of a new life stage for the guy. He was rushing to the awakening ceremony at Chingcheng Academy. Hundreds of senior students gathered around the huge crystal, ready for the awakening. Chuan made it in time for the ceremony to start. The guy hoped that his illness would have no effect on what profession he would get. Suddenly, someone from behind called out the young man's name. Turning around, Chuan saw his classmate Xu Lingxuan. The girl was happy that he had come. Lingxuan bumped the boy's shoulder with her fist and said that she would slap him if he was late. Chuan looked at his friend and saw a huge laughing pig snout. The young man looked at the girl in surprise, who strongly disliked that he didn't react in any way. But he continued to stare at her in silence. The main problem caused by the illness was the inability to date and build any kind of relationship. It was very uncomfortable for Chuan to see a potential partner in such a piggish way. Suddenly, one of the students, seeing Chuan and Lingxuan walking under the arm, wryly remarked that it was high time they got married and had children. The girl shrieked and asked her classmates not to say anything like that. Lingxuan smiled and suggested to her interlocutor not to react to these jokes in any way. In response, the boy once again said nothing. Suddenly, the headmaster loudly asked the students to line up according to their number. He reminded them that each of them would receive a profession today, which would be chosen based on the skills of strength, agility, and spirit that the students had managed to acquire within the walls of the academy. The director reminded that during the awakening it is necessary to concentrate all their energy because the profession received can radically change everyone's life. The man reminded that in case of receiving a combat profession, a young warrior will have to defy fate and bring glory to the Chingcheng Academy. After his words, the first of the students put his hand on the awakening stone. A few seconds later, the fat guy was surprised to see that he had obtained the profession of intermediate metalworker. Such lifetime professions were the most common and usually gave not the strongest positions at the beginning of a graduate's adult life. The next student got the advanced healer profession, which was also not a sought-after specialization. Following him, another guy got the junior engineer profession. Time after time, the graduates got lifetime professions, and the principal started to worry that this time no one would show high results. After several dozen failing students, a guy with red hair approached the stone. He placed his trembling hand on the stone, and suddenly a bright golden glow enveloped the square. The principal looked at the student who had obtained the rare martial profession of shadowless bladesman in astonishment. The other graduates also stared at the guy in astonishment. The principal was happy that his academy would be able to graduate at least one warrior this year. He asked the boy to tell his name. The muscular student proudly looked at the old man and replied that his name was Liu Jinglong. The satisfied principal patted the kid's shoulder and said that he had a great name. The man suggested that the student meet after the ceremony was over to discuss his life path. Jinglong thanked the principal and waved to him and walked down the stairs to the bottom of the stairs. After that, the dean called the next student to the stone. Yaquan slowly walked up the stairs. He was terrified at the thought that his fate would be decided in the next minute. The headmaster knew very well that this fellow had been performing extremely well in his studies. The young man put both hands on the stone at once. The principal thought that something unusual must be happening. Suddenly, the stone spurted outward a huge stream of crazy energy. The headmaster exclaimed that he had been waiting for this golden glow his whole life. It was noticeable how the awakening stone cracked in several places. Chuan stared at the bright glow in amazement. He believed that he would be able to pull it off. Covering his face with his hand, the headmaster exclaimed that this year, the academy would produce a divine-level profession holder for the first time in many years. Before suddenly, the name of the profession, Divine Pig Butcher, appeared on the stone. The rector almost fainted from what he saw. The glow of the stone faded, and the entire square was filled with hearty laughter. Many people didn't even think that such a profession still existed. The only one who didn't laugh was the headmaster. He thought that the heavens were playing a joke on him in this way. The old man had been the rector of this academy for many years, and this was the first time he had seen a person with divine awakening. And this brat was given such a lowly profession. Even if the boy became a blacksmith or an alchemist, the academy could declare it with pride. But as it turned out, the higher the hope, the greater the disappointment. Barely restraining himself from crying, the old man turned to the student. Suddenly, Chuan got inside the system that was supposed to tell him about the profession he had received. The hero card said that one of his talents was called Swine Nemesis. This interested the guy, and he started to read the text written in the notice. What caught his attention was the 50% damage bonus against swine. Chuan instantly realized that the heavens were indeed treacherous, for his profession didn't seem so bad now. His specialization offered him the ability to slice people with the same ease as a butcher cutting off a pig's head. Yaquan silently walked down the stairs below. From the crowd of people, insults continued to fly towards him. The students in the front rows couldn't stop mocking the boy. He pointed his finger at the loser and shouted that instead of a real fighter, the academy had produced some butcher. Lingxuan immediately ran up to the boy and tried to cheer him up. She stroked the boy's head and told him that following in his parents' footsteps was not shameful at all. Some students were furious at what they saw, for some butcher was not worthy of the attention of such a beautiful girl. Chuan and Lingxuan were neighbors, and they had grown up together. Their families had professions related to ordinary life, so they constantly cheered each other up. Lingxuan was the next in line to go out to the stone. The girl said of the protagonist that it didn't matter if she became a winemaker like her father or a tailor like her mother. Either way, she would support Chuan. After that, Lingxuan walked over to the stone and reached out to the monolith with a trembling hand. For the third time in a row, unusual things began to happen to the stone. A huge release of energy, comparable to Chuan's awakening, occurred this time as well. The principal shouted at the top of his voice that the girl had awakened into a legendary profession. A few seconds later, an inscription appeared on the stone, saying that Zhu Lingxuan had obtained the legendary quality martial profession, Snow Soul Sword Immortal. The headmaster once again froze in place, unable to utter a single word. He couldn't believe that this girl whose parents were the most ordinary laborers could awaken such a profession. Perhaps it was some kind of mutation. When the ritual was over, the principal told the student that she could not worry, and the academy would help her with whatever she needed. The girl thanked the rector and slowly walked down the altar into the crowd. The female student standing nearby whispered. They were wondering how the relationship between Ye Chuan and Zhu Lingxuan would develop now. Just a few minutes ago, they were the same, but now they were already living in different worlds. Lingxuan approached Chuan, who clapped his hands and congratulated the girl. Suddenly, she turned to the protagonist and said that they needed to clear up some misunderstandings. She explained that they were now living in different worlds and their future paths could not cross. Standing behind the girl's back, Jinglong whispered with his associates, anticipating a quarrel. But suddenly, Chuan said with a smile that he was fine with it. The surprised Lingshan coughed and added that what she had said sounded terrible, but she had a big, beautiful life ahead of her, and the boy would remain a butcher. The girl said that everything was settled between them from now on, and then asked her interlocutor not to disturb her in the future. Suddenly, Chuan turned around and after saying goodbye to Lingshan, went to the exit. He was glad that he was able to get rid of this pig-headed girl. Jinglong immediately ran to the upset girl and offered to teach the arrogant brat a lesson. Lingxuan looked indifferently at the departing boy and said nothing. Jinglong thought it was an unspoken agreement and immediately shouted at Chuan. But the protagonist didn't stop and continued walking towards the exit. Surprised at such insolence, Jinglong ran up to the young man and grabbed his arm, ordering him to stop. Chuan turned around and asked in a quiet voice what the bulky man wanted from him. Jinglong saw the brat's aura begin to pulse with a bright purple light. The brat was startled for a moment and abruptly yanked his hand away. Jinglong felt for a moment like a pig that had been placed on the cutting table before slitting its throat. Immediately, the people around him started laughing after seeing a rare class warrior being frightened by some butcher. Realizing that after this situation, he might be considered a coward, Jinglong once again called out to the boy. Kuan once again did not stop, and this finally infuriated the red-haired boy. He swung his fist, shouting that no one dared to dishonor him like that. At the same instant, Chuan abruptly turned around and also swung back. Their fists clashed in the air, followed by the crunch of broken bones. Jinglong jumped aside and grabbed his broken arm, screaming in pain. With their mouths hanging open, the bystanders who were watching couldn't believe it. Jinglong shouted that some dirty butcher couldn't do something like this. Chuan calmly replied that a successful butcher must necessarily have the strength in his hands to cut pigs without any problems. Several people pointed out in surprise that the butcher had broken the arm of a rare class warrior. Out of rage, Jinglong looked at his opponent and shouted that he would kill him. His arm instantly regenerated, and the guy used a spell displaying a magic sword in front of him. The onlookers were horrified by this. Many felt that the butcher shouldn't have fought with a martial specialization holder. Jinglong said that his void battle sword could effortlessly cut a steel pipe in half. The red-haired fellow promised that Chuan would be left without a couple limbs for his audacity. But suddenly, the blade of the blade began to become heavy. Glancing at the weapon, Jinglong saw that it was freezing. Before the student knew it, his body quickly began to freeze. Unable to turn his head, he looked at Lingshan and asked why she was still helping this brat. The girl ordered him to stop this outrage. She explained that she didn't want to see someone fiercely fighting over her. After that, Lingshan turned to Chuan. She said that she had just demonstrated that they were no longer in the same world. She asked the guy to leave. Chuan indifferently scratched his ear, not understanding why these two originally didn't let him go. Lingshuan said that it was better for the guy to leave the city, as next time he might not be around, and then there would be no one to protect him. With a loud yawn, Chuan indifferently turned around and said that it was time for him to go home. The crowded people escorted him with surprised looks. The boy really didn't seem to take anything he said seriously. Chuan slowly walked down one of the streets towards home. Suddenly, he was blocked by a dog that started barking at him. Chuan stopped and looked at the strange animal in surprise. As always, in front of him was an unusual mix of a dog and a pig. The animal grabbed the guy by his pants, and Chuan asked the creature's owner to take his pig dog away from the road where people walk. The crazy woman said that this road belongs to everyone, and young people have less and less compassion for defenseless animals these days. The guy quietly looked away and exhaled. He had the perfect excuse to test the theory in practice. Jumping up, he kicked the dog in the stomach with all his might. The animal fell down beside its mistress, instantly losing its breath. While the woman couldn't realize if her pet was still alive, Chuan received a notification from the system to raise the extra damage. Just as he suspected, the system was indeed working. Realizing that her dog wasn't breathing, the woman pounced on the boy, screaming that she would fight to the death for her innocently killed child. When the claws of this mad woman were already close to Chuan's face, the boy said he was a psychopath. Instantly pulling out a folder with the diagnosis, he showed it to the woman, who immediately stopped. Chuan looked at his rival with a crazy look and added that he had to urgently go about his business. The old woman immediately thought that she had almost died at the hands of a psychopath because of some lousy dog. Smiling, the woman said that she had no complaints, after which she wished the guy a good journey. A while later, Chuan reached the Ye family manor. He was greeted by his parents at the doorstep. His father said from the doorstep that he was happy that Chuan had gotten his ancestors' profession. Chuan looked at them in surprise, not understanding how they knew the results of his awakening. The father told his son that they were honest butchers, and they were not made for battles and fights. He promised the boy that he would take him to the slaughterhouse tomorrow. Soon night fell. A bright moon barely broke through the clouds. Chuan fell soundly asleep on his sickbed, dressed in his pig-shaped pajamas. At this moment, a dark entity appeared outside the window. Through his sleep, Mr. Yi addressed the ghost. The man said that his son had become a butcher like him, and there was no need to bother them anymore. The strange man in the hat said that everyone in their organization was surprised that Ghost Creek's son would be butchering pigs from now on. These words infuriated Mr. Ye. Rising up, he once again ordered the strange man to get out of here and not to bother his family from now on. The stranger in the hat nodded and promised that from now on, the organization would not appear in this house again. After these words, the strange man silently vanished into thin air. The next day, as promised, the father took his son to his meat processing factory. Pulling back the curtain in the cutting area, the man looked around and then entered. In front of him on the wall hung a frame with 3 butcher knives attached to it. His father said this is where any butcher's journey begins. Pointing to the stand, he invited his son to choose one of the knives he liked. The boy came closer and began to look at his father's knives with amazement. His choice soon settled on one of them, and Chuan took hold of the hilt. Immediately, the system notified the protagonist that for every pig killed with this knife, he would receive 1/10 of an attribute point. Turning back to his father, Chuan saw a pig hanging from the ceiling that was twitching hysterically. Mr. Yi told his son that every butcher should first learn how to use his knife. The father ordered his son to try to kill this pig with a single blow to the weak spot. Chuan looked at the helpless animal in amazement, realizing that there was no turning back. He swung his blade and gave the animal a fatal blow to the neck. After a short convulsion, the pig finally gave out. The system notified the awakened man to increase the damage and receive a free attribute point. The father praised his son, but noted that the strike was not accurate enough and one should try to aim for the carotid artery. Chuan turned around and looked at his father. Apparently, the boy should practice more to learn how to do it properly. Then Chuan suddenly asked his father to slaughter all those pigs in the enclosure behind him. The man laughed and said that he recognized the roots of the Ye family in his son. He let the boy slaughter all the pigs he had the strength to slaughter. Chuan then walked over to the enclosure and began mercilessly stabbing the defenseless animals. The massacre lasted for several minutes, during which the boy had no trouble slaughtering all the pigs. A short while later, he disposed of all the animals. After hanging the carcasses, Chuan sat down on a chair and looked at the notice. The guy had killed 49 pigs in total, increasing his basic stats and raising his level. One of the butchers looked at the young man in surprise and said that Chuan had fulfilled their daily quota in a couple of minutes. In response, Mr. Yi only chuckled, replying that it was not surprising. He explained that his son had awakened to the divine pig butcher profession. Through intense training, Chuan was able to get used to this butcher knife. It was time to try his hand at something more serious. This was what Chuan decided to do the next day. For a long time now, this world had been overrun by thousands of different horrible creatures. In order to survive, humanity had to unite into a federation. Qingcheng was located on the outer border of the 5th of the 9 counties. Instead of working, Chuan headed to the borderlands early in the morning. The guard at the gate blocked the boy's path, saying that the holder of a life profession had the right to go no further than 1 kilometer beyond the gate. Chuan said that he knew this, and silently continued walking beyond the wall. A while later, the kid found himself in a dark forest that was completely silent. Suddenly, some rustling was heard in the bushes behind him. The boy turned around, and at that moment, the goblin that was hiding in the shelter jumped out from behind. Screeching like a pig, the monster pounced at Chuan. The butcher realized that judging from the color, it was a goblin. The kid activated the Blood Shadow Butcher skill to check what would happen. Seeing the bright glow of the enemy's aura, the goblin froze and squealed in fear. The monster had no time to do anything, and Chuan chopped off the creature's head with a single throw. As expected, the stronger the entity killed by the butcher, the greater the skill boost received. While Chuan was looking at the system notification, dozens of creatures were already gawking at him from behind. Sensing that he wasn't alone here, the kid remembered that his teacher had warned him that goblins didn't walk alone. On the other hand, that was exactly what he needed. A large number of opponents gave him a chance to level up faster. The goblins pounced on the lone butcher in a large crowd with shouts. Chuan was already faster and stronger than when he had awakened, and easily cut the monsters down. The creatures didn't manage to land a single blow on the guy. In the end, only one goblin remained standing in front of the butcher. The kid looked at the trembling monster and said that he hadn't played yet. He stomped his foot, and the goblin ran away in a panic. After following the last monster, Chuan came across a cave. Apparently, this was where the surviving goblins lived. A few minutes later, the kid had almost completely cleared the dungeon, killing most of the creatures. He glanced at the system notification again, assessing the progress made during the massive massacre. Suddenly, a quiet rustle was heard behind the butcher again. Turning around, the kid saw a wooden wall, behind which were clearly goblins. Kuan shattered the partition with a single kick. He looked around the room and couldn't believe his eyes. In front of him sat a bound and gagged girl with little goblins crawling around her. Her tear-stained eyes begged the stranger for help.